Hello, everyone, and welcome back to More Than Commas. I'm your host, Paul Adams, also CEO of Sound Financial Group. Today, we've got something special for you. Last year, when we changed the name of the podcast to More Than Commas, our aim was to bring you content like today's, where we're talking to somebody who's going to help you maybe be able to enjoy your career more, enjoy your personal life more, have lower stress, etc. So we're joined by Cody Sandzimier. I think, did I get it close? Dr. Cody, I'm sorry.
90%, you were there.
Right. Well, I'll take 90% in this case. Cody is a doctor of chiropractic and the creator of something called the Loop Timer. Actually, have one here I'm using right now. And this Loop Timer takes a very different approach and has really changed my orientation of the way that I think about time. Cody, as we kick this off, I've just got to say, when you mentioned in our very first conversation, maybe this is a good way for me to ask you about where this started. You know, for our audience, I'm like, let's just cover what the timer is first, because I think the rest of the conversation makes so much more sense inside of that. But when you mentioned to me, we don't have a sensory organ for time, but we live in it. It's a constant part of our environment. And that your timer solved that. So with that, I'm going to have you kind of talk about the beginning of Loop Timer, and then we'll transition into some of the psychology and dynamics and how it can affect people's financial lives even.
Yeah. Loop Timer is a very simple product. To give a quick kind of basis of it, so it's got a light around the face, and as time counts down, light travels around the face like a progress bar, and then when time ends, it flashes. The reason I developed this was actually quite simple. In my practice, we do a lot of rehab. And so we fix people's postures. We end up setting people up on these crazy looking, like torture device looking setups. And so we time everything. And when somebody's done with a traction and the timer's going off, we want to try to get them out as quickly as possible because it's a relatively uncomfortable position. What I would notice is that when a timer would go off, my rehab techs would blow past the timer every single time. And it's because when you're in a small enclosure, in a small environment, and you have multiple timers in a small enclosure, and they only let you know via sound, it's very difficult to tell where that sound is coming from. And so I tried to find a timer that would let me know visually when time had expired. I couldn't find anything. I looked for like weeks and I couldn't find anything. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this. It started off with that simple of a concept, just something that would let me know visually when time had expired. As I was developing this, I kind of came across this epiphany of the progress bar aspect. And I started to realize how useful this was going to be for so many different applications outside of this. So it's a visual timer. And it kind of put me down the rabbit hole of understanding like how we perceive time. And I started to realize that time is a very interesting kind of concept in general because everybody bases their life on time, every single one of us. And it's also one of those unique things that transcends culture and language and location because across the earth, every single person on earth bases time on the same metrics. We use seconds, we use minutes, we use hours, days, weeks, months. Now, we may have different calendars, but the units of time is the same. So it doesn't matter whether you speak English or Chinese or anything, it's all the same, right? And so that was really interesting to me. And so then it started to kind of go down the rabbit hole of understanding like how our brains perceive time. And that's where that concept of we don't have a sensory organ in our brain to understand time. Our brain has to piece together all these different external stimuli into our psyche to understand a time sense of duration and what time is. And so that's kind of where it started to go light bulb, understand why this is so effective for so many different people, whether you have ADHD, whether you have neurodivergence and time blindness, or just, you know, a regular old, you know, financial advisor who needs to be more efficient with their time. And so it's been a really fun journey up to this point.
Well, you know, when we were talking, and I'm going to kind of show everybody who's at least watching on YouTube, and I'll explain it to our podcast listeners, something that occurred to me when you were explaining the remaining time. So for those of you listening, this little timer, if let's say you set a 10-minute timer, then it works around the border. So the top edge would be 1/4 of the time, 2.5 minutes, then 2.5 minutes down the side, 2.5 minutes across the bottom, 2.5 minutes up the other side.
So I designed this specifically, so not to kind of cut you off, but each length of the timer is 25% of time, right? So each corner represents 25%. So if we do this timer, so each second, it'll hit each corner. And so our brains naturally understand progress bars.
That's exactly where I wanted to go. So let me just show this to everybody. And this is a recent episode that we released. It's actually a revamp of Mr. Scott Adams' appearance on our podcast years ago. And of course, he recently passed. So when we were talking and Cody was discussing this idea of how much time is left, and that's really what we end up doing, that if we have a 30-minute timer, then we're like, we see there's 20 minutes left, but we're not present to wait. How much have I gotten done in the 10 minutes? How much time is left, etc. And when Cody was walking me through this, what I realized is what I constantly do on YouTube videos. Now, I'm sure none of you do this, that when you're listening to one of our episodes, you're like, oh my gosh, how much time is left? But maybe you do. Other people's videos, I'm sure you guys are constantly waiting until they're over. But with our videos, if what you want to do is say, oh, I'm 20 minutes in, it's a 56-minute video, very quickly I do the math if I got 30 minutes left. And when Cody started talking about this, I'm like, that's what everybody does. I watch my wife and kids do it with progress bars when we're watching a movie or something else. And that what we're constantly dealing with and what we have uniquely when we watch a YouTube video is we actually see progress of how much time has passed, which gives like some kind of sensory input of what's happening right now. Cause sometimes it passes fast, sometimes it passes slow. And yet it's like we get a progress bar in our daily life with this tool.
This goes back to like our primitive brains. Let's rewind, 100 years, even further, 200 years before technology. We were, our primitive brains based time based on the sun, right? And so we've heard of like circadian rhythm, and we have different rhythms within our body, and they are all driven by chemical releases in our body, hormones, right? And there's certain stimuli that causes that. So for melatonin, for example, so when we go to sleep, melatonin is released when the light starts to dim. There's no more light. It gets dark. Our brain goes, okay, it's time for us to get ready for sleep. So it produces the hormone melatonin. Fast forward to today, right? And we have kind of different lives in different environments. We have internal lights. We have so many different distractions and so many different things that we have to pay attention to that our brain starts to lose where we are in space and where we are in time. I came across this really interesting study. It was by Jürgen Ashcroft, and it was done in 1985. And what he did is he took a whole bunch of subjects and he put them in a bunker. And what they were doing is for some of the subjects, they gave them no stimuli, no light, there was no windows, there was nothing. And they wanted to see what their perception was with short intervals and long intervals. And the conclusion was nobody knew anything about how long time was. If it was a long period of time, people tended to underestimate how long they were there. They're like, oh, I've only been in here for 2 days, but they've been in there for 5 days, right? Or it's like they want to do like, 10 minutes or an hour, and they would overestimate it. It's a really interesting concept. And we've all kind of done this in our lives. We all experience this. And it's all driven by chemicals and hormones. I found that really interesting. And one of the big ones that kind of drives time perception is dopamine and serotonin and these chemicals that we know as far as like adrenaline. And we kind of like rudimentarily understand this without understanding the science. So there's a common phrase, and I'm going to say this to you and I want you to complete the phrase. Time flies when you're having
fun.
There you go. And so what happens is you have this massive release of dopamine and serotonin when you're doing something exciting, and it changes the brain's perception of time. The same happens with like a traumatic event. Somebody's in a really significant car accident. I'm a chiropractor. I see a lot of people in traumatic injuries. And a very common thing that I hear from people is that time slowed down. Like it just felt like it just took so long. You start to realize that our perception of time is really kind of an internal thing for us. And that's where we tend to struggle with it because we always want to manage our time better. I think there's it's $1 trillion industry as far as self-help and, how do we get more out of our day and how do we be more productive? And we are in an attention economy. I am using my phone right now as the camera, and that device is designed to take our attention, to spike dopamine. And so when we tend to sit down to do a task, if we don't set ourselves in the right environment and we don't set ourselves up for success, we tend to be not productive. And that's not a matter of you need to pay attention more. It's not a matter of just focus and, work on it. It's the environments and lives that we live. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted to make something super simple, just minute, second, start, stop, light around the face. And I started off this journey of just something simple to let me know when people were doing traction. And it's just kind of blown up into this thing is I don't know that there's a single person on this planet that wouldn't benefit from something like this when they have to do a task to do something because it removes the stimuli. If you use your phone as a timer, it's a portal to procrastination. I don't know how many times I've done this where it's like, oh, I'm going to check an email.
Portal to procrastination. I love that.
So you go oh, I'm going to check an email. And the next thing you know, 20 minutes goes by and you're like, wait, what was I doing originally? And so It's a constant struggle with all of us. We all are affected with it, but there are certain populations that are affected more. So people with executive function disorders like neurodivergence and ADHD and autism, it's very difficult for our brains to do this mental math and take all these different external stimuli to get a sense of duration. And then what that leads into is frustration, is anxiety, is stress, is we have these tasks that we have to do in life and we get overwhelmed because we often overestimate how long something will take, or overestimate how much we can do in a certain time and underestimate how much time that will take. And
Yes.
that comes down into understanding a sense of duration.
Well, so this is a little bit of a funny story from my past, but I lived in Las Vegas kind of through high school in my early career. And some of the kids at high school would get jobs at the Caesar's Palace like shops. And what a lot of people don't know is that those lights cycle as if it's going daytime to nighttime again. And they cycle, I think it takes 45 minutes or an hour. Every kid that worked in that mall said it was awful because it felt like the day took forever. Unless they could work in the back where they were away from the lighting change of the main mall area, because it didn't happen in the stores. And it's a technique that casinos use, like in the bunker, people will underestimate the amount of time, the longer the time, and your biggest gamblers are the longest times, hence why there's no time reference tools inside of a casino. And in this case, Caesar said, hey, we got this big distraction that could keep people away from the casino floor, so we're going to make them feel like they've been there longer than they have. Get them back on the casino floor where time is stable and we don't have these lights changing like it's day and night. And I hadn't really thought of that in the context of course, it's messing them up, probably like somebody working graveyard.
I will expand on this because you actually highlighted one of the examples that I was going to use was actually specifically Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
And we have certain rhythms within our body. And I forget the name of the rhythm because it's kind of difficult to say, but like we have circadian rhythm, right? But there's a specific rhythm that is specifically 90 to 120 minutes. And so what it means is we tend to be able to be engaged and focused for that time span max. And the reason for this is it comes back down to our chemical internal makeup in the sense of our body starts to produce less serotonin and dopamine after about the 90-minute mark. And so this goes into like a productivity hack is if you have to power through and do something for a day and you have to like, I've been needing to get this done, I'm just going to spend all day doing it. You got about a 90-minute clock before you start to really diminish your focus and your engagement and your productivity because those chemicals start to wear off. And so Vegas knows this. And so if they remove the perception of duration, you don't know how long you've been there, and they're able to get you longer than 90 minutes, you start making poor decisions. And that's when things start to really, up for them because they're in the industry of making people part with their money, right? And they may be in incorrect ways or do things longer than they should have, or then that's when things start to kind of snowball. But that kind of translates to other things in our life. And so it's kind of interesting. It's one of the reasons why with Loop Timer in particular, we just for this first version went with minutes and seconds. And the max amount of time that you can set on this is actually 99 minutes and 59 seconds. And there's a little bit of a psychology with that because once you go beyond that amount, you become significantly less productive. And so this goes into like, for you, Paul, like when you have things that you have to work on, whether, it's preparation for a podcast or something with a client, that you've been like, it's something that's going to be a big project. You're going to work through it 90 minutes max. And so there's a peak time of that in which you're the most productive. And then after that 90 minutes, even if you need to power through, you got to take a break. Let those chemical mediators, the chemical hormones in the body kind of reset themselves to be able to be more productive. It's science. That's why they do what they do and they know what they're doing.
So are you saying that when I end up with an open spot of time after working really hard and I take a nap, science says great idea?
100%. Actually, that's
good.
Not just agreeing with you. It's what should happen. You reset your brain.
We can leave this in, but if everybody would please comment, Paul does need naps, Corey. Like, let's just tag Corey in that. Let him know Paul does need naps. Doctor prescribed.
This episode is brought to you by Sound Financial Group. At Sound Financial, we specialize in helping clients build strong, long-term financial strategies for their retirement. If you're looking for personalized advice to help manage your wealth, visit us at sfgway.com to learn more about how we can help you achieve your goals.
people use other timers. Like I got this little thing years ago, and you just twist it. But again, when you and I began talking, the realization was there is nothing present for me of when I started the timer. The timer on my phone doesn't do that. It's like I then have to go back, and just like the YouTube progress bar, how much time has passed, and I got to do the math of what's left. So let's say somebody's listening to this today, and they want to do something immediate. They're going to go on a website and order a loop timer. We'll have the link like in the episode notes. But would the suggestion be is like, if I've got to set a 20-minute timer, that I should at a minimum put a Post-it note next to it or something saying I started at 20 minutes, so that when the tick down occurs, while somebody listening is going to maybe order a loop timer, but they want to try this. Is that the easiest way somebody could try it today when they get to the office?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So let's kind of go back one step and kind of explain why the timer that you just showed is more difficult for us to manage our time. It's because it comes down to mental math. Right.
Which is the same on our cell phones, right? Is that mental math we still have to do?
That's correct. So with our cell phones are more likely to pull us away from our focus and engagement. A notification, an app pop up, an email, whatever. But with what you have, whether it's an old school, analog clock that has the dial, or you're doing numbers, you have to do mental math. And so you're basically taking your focus away to try to understand duration while you're trying to do another task, and it's multitasking, right? So I would say the easiest
increased cognitive load is how we talk to our clients about it.
So the biggest hack that I can give without using a visual timer, let's say you just want to implement this today, is you have to, if you're going to set a timer, you have to do the one thing during that time, right? And you have to kind of ignore all the external stimuli. Do not use your phone. Do not use your phone as a timer because it's so easy to pull yourself away. Now, there's actually lots of visual timers. I'm not the first one that's developed a visual timer. So they have them on web applications. There's phone apps. There's free stuff that you can get all the time. And I think having that visual component is going to be super helpful just to help you understand, again, the time and duration, because it allows you to estimate how much time is left. So I'm going to use loop timer as an example. So I paused it, right? And so that there's half the time left. You can see half the light is there, right? You don't have to do any more mental math, understanding like where you're at in space and how much time you have remaining. Really adding in a visual component is going to be super helpful. One of the things that we did with loop timer in particular, because of the mental math aspect, is there's a switch on the back that actually allows you, when you're timing things, to remove the actual time. And so therefore, when you're actually running it, it just does the visual. So you're not having to be distracted by the mental time. And then when time goes off, it flashes and it starts counting up. So you know how long time has been going off. And so I'd say 2 tips is, one, if you can incorporate some type of visual component, that's ideal, right? Now I'm biased. I developed a product for this specific application, and I'm really excited about the other things that I want to develop. I want to this is just like the proof of model concept of just like, 1, can I produce something that is good? And number 2, is something that people want, right? And it's a resounding yes, right? I mean, I get wonderful feedback every single day. But the most common things that I get questions on is like, hey, can I make this programmable? Can I do Pomodoro timer? Can I do it like 25 on, 5 off, or some version of that? Can I do it to where it's linkable? So those are the next versions that I'm gonna develop, is more robust timers, maybe longer timers, as well as like wall clock versions. But I'd say in the meantime, as far as actionable things for you to take away from today, number 1 is give yourself some grace. It's not a matter of you just need to pay attention more, or you need to focus more, or there's something wrong with you. It's a human innate issue that we all struggle with. So that's number 1. Number 2 is set yourself up to do one thing for a set amount of time and max 90 minutes. Preferably less than that, but max 90 minutes. If you have to work through and power through something all day, you have to do a marathon session, you got to take a break every 90 minutes, because that resets the chemicals in your brain to allow you to be able to continue doing the things, right? And then number 3 is set yourself up for success with reducing the amount of distraction that you can do in a possible way. Remove the phone from a timer, set it off to the side, put it on airplane mode, something along those lines. And you will notice that your life productivity, your stress levels starts to really reduce. Like, I could talk about this all day long, because we tend to tie our emotions to a sense of duration. And so that's where the frustration and the stress comes in. And I heard this amazing TED talk where they were talking about, one of the dangers of thinking about your time in a sense of a financial aspect of like, I make X per hour. Like when you especially get to the higher levels of income, it's, you're making $500 an hour, and it's like, is it worth your time to pass $100 bill on the ground or keep walking? They have those analogies.
Yeah.
And the problem when you do that is you start to devalue your time actually, because you start to have these comparisons. Well, like I'm spending an hour with a friend where I could be making money. This is a waste of my time. That's not how this works. So I think there's a danger of doing that. And so it's a matter of taking some time, relaxing, getting yourself into an ideal situation and setting yourself up for success with things like this. So biased, I think you should get a loop timer. I think it works really well. But you don't have to do that. There's also apps. There's also programs online. Using some kind of visual component is going to make your life so much easier.
Well, and one last thing as we talk about the 90 minutes and take a break, what do you recommend people do? I'm assuming during the break, if I'm working on Excel spreadsheets, I shouldn't be checking my emails.
Yeah.
Like what would you suggest that gets the best chemical reset over that 10 to 30 minute break somebody takes?
This is where my chiropractic side comes in. So understanding how the kind of body works and functions, I'd say the number one thing that people can do, they often don't do, is rehydrate yourself. Your brain is mostly water. And so you have water in your muscles, right? And even when you exhale, you're actually exhaling water. So you can dehydrate yourself when you start to kind of get worked up with these type of things. So number one is hydrate yourself immediately. Number two is replenish the nutrients in your body. So I would recommend eating something, right? And so there's different schools of thought when it comes to food. There's like OMAD, 1 meal a day type of thing. There's like snacking throughout the day. But if you have to power through something, replenish your body with fuel that you need, and obviously not sugar and junk and things like that, because you'll have a big spike and a crash, something that's kind of on the lower end. And then I would say the other thing is get your blood pumping, get yourself moving, go take a walk. Go walk around for a minute and get some sunlight. If it's daylight, get some good oxygen in your lungs to kind of refresh things. Those are going to be the easiest things to kind of have an immediate effect. Water, get your body moving.
And as a reminder, when you all are thinking about getting a snack and hydrating in between, I remember this stat and I'm like, I think I got to double check it. So I just checked in AI. 20% of our resting calories are just burned by the gray matter between our ears. And so if we're working through a project, we've got to take care of the rest of our body, because the rest of our body maintains that noodle between our ears. I'm so glad, Dr. Cody, you could be here. I hope for all of you listening that this gives you something that you can take into your day-to-day, that what you would do is, in the morass of everything coming at you every day, is that one project you need to just set aside 15 or 30 minutes for, set the time, get away from it, and then check out the loop timer. Maybe a tool like that, or one of these free visual tools that he mentioned. Get something that's going to give you a sensory organ for the duration of time, the one thing we all live in universally across the earth. And so, Dr. Cody, I'm so glad you could be here and share this with our team. How can people best get a hold of you if they wanted to follow up?
So pretty straightforward. If you want to reach out to me directly and have a nerdy conversation about time management, or you have questions, you can email me, cody@looptimer.com. But if you want to check out Loop Timer, there's lots of videos that we have on our website, looptimer.com. We ship anywhere in the world, and so you can get them on our website, looptimer.com, and we'd be happy for you to join the Loop Troop and
I like that.
manage your time better.
Right on. Well, everyone, we're so glad you could join us. We hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and more than anything, I hope you get back after listening to this and living a great life.